many transgender police officers are there?
Good afternoon, Andrew. I don't know is the honest answer. I know we have at least one in Surrey, but actually this isn't about transgender officers. My problem isn't with transgender officers searching specifically. My issue is with self-identification and the idea that any officer can choose to self-ID and that day be allowed to intimately search somebody of the opposite sex. They may be of the same gender that the officer is identifying with, but they may be of the opposite sex. So just to be absolutely clear, transgender officers, largely speaking, the same as other officers, want to get on with their jobs, want to be excellent police officers, are excellent police officers. But when we have examples like people like Wayne Couzens, who we know will abuse their position in order to be able to attack women, what is stopping somebody under these current guidelines abusing the guideline and their position in order to intimately search a woman, somebody of the opposite sex, for reasons that I think none of us would be comfortable with, including genuine transgender officers?
Just remind us then, Lisa, what those police guidelines currently say.
Yeah, that's right. So the current guidelines say that if somebody identifies as a different gender from the sex that they were born into. So if you, Andrew, were a police officer and you decided to identify as a woman tomorrow morning and you were a police officer and you said, call me Andrea, then from that moment, your colleagues and policing should treat you as a woman and therefore allow you to intimately search a woman, a female who has been brought into custody, who of course hasn't been tried or convicted of anything, and may herself be vulnerable. She may have experienced abuse, trauma, mental health issues and all of that. And what concerns me about it is we're putting the feelings of potentially this man, this male, against the rights of a woman to have another woman search her.
What's been the reaction of your own police force to your stance here?
Well, I think Surrey Police are actually quite sensible on this, if I'm completely honest. I think they will always look at who is in custody. There will be differing views, of course, as there are across this issue. What I'm more concerned about, actually, I'm an elected Police and Crime Commissioner, elected by the residents of Surrey to represent the residents of Surrey. And they're the people who I hold the police to account on behalf of. So my job isn't to agree with what the police do, or for them even to agree with what I think. It's to hold them to account, to make sure they are delivering the absolute best services for residents of Surrey. And what the residents of Surrey largely, by some margin, largely tell me is that they are not comfortable with men in particular being able to self-ID into women's spaces.
What about the issue of trans prisoners? This is an issue, isn't it, where a male prisoner may identify as a woman and then expect to go to a women's-only prison.
Yeah, and it won't come as a massive surprise to you to learn that I and many others have an issue with that. I'm not necessarily suggesting there should be a blanket sort of policy on this. I do think that it needs to be looked at case by case. But where somebody, for example, has committed a sexual or violent act against a woman, and we know that the biggest predictor of whether somebody will commit a sexual or violent act is your biology. It's straightforwardly whether you were born male or female. It's not how you identify. Where somebody has done that clearly as a man, and rape in this country, in order to reach the legal definition of rape, it has to be penetration with a penis, so you have to be male, where that person then identifies as a woman in order to get into a woman's prison. I think we should all, again, have very, very serious issues with that, because women in prison are themselves quite uniquely vulnerable. Whatever reason they're there for, whatever their background in terms of trauma, and we know that as a female prison population, they overwhelmingly have experienced trauma in their lives and often domestic abuse. Those women are quite literally a sort of captive group. And so to put somebody in there with them, a male who has, committed some of the most heinous acts that one human can commit against another, just seems to me it goes against all common sense and everything that we know to be right.